Thank you, everybody, for coming today. It's been probably 3 years since I've been to one of these seminars, and it's really exciting to be back in this room, in this space. And I imagine that there's probably still lots of people online as well that I can't see. And so it feels kind of healing to come back here and connect with you all. And also really moving and exciting to be able to host our colleagues from further north, Dr. Richard Oster and Muslim Rick Lightning today for to share some of their work, which is rather an immense portfolio that they have together, I think. And I hope that in addition to being able to come here today, they'll be able to come more. We'll be able to see and connect more in the years to come. And that questions to them and to our wider Indigenous health team are welcome at the end. And we have now, in the last couple of years, really grown our Indigenous health portfolio in the Cummings School of Medicine with the Office of Indigenous, Local, and Global Health. And I'm just reminding or welcoming everybody to come and look at that space that is now open. It was formerly the Space Office, the Strategic Partnerships and Community Engagement, because there's now a lovely Indigenous room, Indigenous ceremonial space in there. And so not many people have been able to connect to it because of COVID. And also there's a new mural that will be celebrated this fall that's out in our shared space. So please, I welcome everybody to connect to Indigenous initiatives in the medical school and thank our guests very much for coming all the way from Edmonton today. So thank you. And speaking into the mic is helpful to get to the people online, I think.
Okay, I'll try and remember that. Can you see me over top? Thanks, Rita, so much. That's I think it is healing to be back in person. It's also kind of weird. It's kind of scary. I haven't been nervous in 3 years. But let me just get my laptop going here. So thanks so much for having us. We're super excited to be here. My name is Richard Oster, and I'm here today with my friends, my colleague, my mentor, my family, Rick Lightning. We've known each other for a long time, been on many adventures together. So this is just another one of the Rick and Rick shows. We're coming back out of retirement. We were invited to speak today and had a lot of flexibility about what we could speak about. And we thought it would be a great chance to talk about relationships in research and what that actually means for us and how, we need to make that the focus of Indigenous health research, not a means to an end, but the actual focus of what we're trying to do. So in terms of introductions for myself, as I said, my name is Richard. My ceremonial spiritual name is Wapastem, which means white horse in Cree. And I come from European descent, a mixed mutt, 25% Danish, and the rest is a whole mix. But our families lived in Treaty 6 territory for 4 generations now. And that's where I live and raise my 2 teenagers. That's my main job. And second to that, I've been really privileged over my career. Sometimes I can't believe how privileged I've been to partner with a number of Indigenous communities here in our province on a number of health-related projects, including Musqueambias, which is where I met Rick about 12 years ago. And we've had a partnership in place for over a decade now. And what else can I say about myself? I always like to say I'm not an expert. I would never try to be an expert in this area. As Rick and I will talk about, I'm a partner. I'm not even an ally really, or those terms. We're partners, we're equal partners. That's kind of the message we'll try and convey today. My day job, I'm scientific director for the Indigenous Wellness Corps of AHS and an adjunct here at U of C and at U of A, where I have an independent research program still that's very closely linked with the communities of Musqueambias. So Rick will introduce himself soon. I'm just kind of the opening act, and Rick is the main attraction and headliner. Okay. Oh, you said arrow, right? Oh, arrow on the screen. That would make sense. There we go. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? We're not here for very long, so I'll get right to the point. I have a couple of slides, only like 5 or 6 slides, to try and convince you that we need to be doing Indigenous health research in a different way that's based on relationships. And I'm going to use our research group partnership in Musqueam as a good example of that, and talk about some of the things that have been really important for Rick and I and for our team in terms of building a relationship and building trust. We talk about that a lot, right? But we need to have relationships, but what does that really look like? What does it entail? And Rick and I will kind of tag team. I'll go first. Okay, if I could just remember how to advance our slides. Okay, so why do we need to do things differently? We could spend a whole course on this. But we only have a few minutes, but often we'll hear about the health disparities, right? There's many health disparities, social disparities that exist between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. And I'm not going to talk about that. But that's usually the reasoning we hear for doing Indigenous health research, but we don't use that. We do know that there's been a very harmful history of research with Indigenous communities. Not all of it, but a lot of it has been harmful. So there's been a lot of mistrust and even exploitation, and sometimes even unethical research that you've probably heard about in the news at times. I think what's more common is, research has the right intentions, but has unintended negative consequences just because of the way it's conducted. So there's patterns that I see in the research. So one of them is that often Indigenous communities are misrepresented in research. Data is collected and taken out of their communities, and it's seen through a lens that doesn't reflect their reality, and it misrepresents them. I think another really common pattern I've noticed in the literature and in my experience has been an external observation of subjects, right? With zero input from communities, and then sort of a top-down authoritarian approach of what should be done in these communities, a paternalistic approach of, someone in their office at the University of Alberta knows what's right for Musqueam, that kind of pattern, right? Another pattern I've seen is, collecting information from communities and, building the careers of researchers and, contributing to knowledge as a whole in the scientific world, but with no tangible benefit for the communities from which the information's being extracted from. And that's not the distant past, right? That still happens today. And, we call that helicopter research. I've heard people in communities describe it as vampire research, just sucking something out of the community and giving nothing back, right? And I think that, things are changing, and that's really good, but that paternalistic kind of Western approach is still very, very real. Yeah. And then yet another pattern that I see is what I call deficit-based research. That's the vast majority of research on Indigenous health is just describing how sick people are. And we believe that we can tell different stories through our research. We can flip that on its head, and we can show the strengths that exist in communities and build from that through research. So that's really been a really foundational underpinning of our research. So these approaches that we're very used to, they're really devoid of any emotional or personal investment in communities. And we're here, I think, to argue that that's exactly what we need, is a personal and emotional investment with the people you're doing research with. So that's a really different perspective than what we're taught in Western science, right? We're taught to be very objective and remove ourselves, right? So if that wasn't enough to convince you why we need to do research in a different way that's based on relationships, a few other things I wanted to say is, interventions typically fail without community input. I've seen that myself. And I've seen the opposite too. When we have good partnerships and equal partnerships and that real investment I'm talking about, things can flourish. And I've seen that too. I think doing things differently is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to reverse negative, inaccurate stereotypes, rectify power imbalances, reverse racism that still exists in plenty. It's a chance to build Indigenous self-determination and build capacity within communities. So what does that mean? What does that look like? What does doing research in a good way look like for us? As I mentioned, it's strengths-based. So strengths-based responsive research, so responding to the community's needs, that's based on relationships. So when we do that, we're situating control back into communities where it rightly needs to be. And when we do that, we have to prioritize time to build relationships, to do engagement, and to build partnerships. I always use this image when I talk about, community engaged, community-based participatory research approaches. It's people coming together from all walks of life with different skills, and everybody is building something together. I think it's a really great visual of what we need to do. So we know this though, right? We know that relationships are important, but how do we make those relationships? What does that entail? How do you actually build trust? So before we get to that, I wanted to just highlight our Musqueam Maternal Child and Family Wellbeing Research Group. This is our lay term description of our research group. I won't read it out to you, but we worked with some Cree speakers from the community, and this is how they reflected what we were talking about. And this is how we talk about our program in the community. This is our logo that we spent a long time developing, and there's a lot of meaning within this logo for us. So you can see the prayer cloth on the tree. That just really reflects how important ceremony is for us. The roots are meant to reflect a number of things, but importantly, our foundation in relationships and how intertwined our lives are, and how from that we're able to flourish and build and grow. And this slide I'm just showing to show off a little bit. We've done a lot of work over the last 10 years, so a whole host of different projects I don't have time to talk about. But today we have 3 kind of cornerstone research projects that are ongoing. These logos were designed by a community artist. So our 3 main projects we have are our Musqueam, Cookham, and Muslim support program. So elders that support pregnant moms and their families during pregnancy and in the clinical setting. In the middle, we have our Deadly Dads logo. So this runs alongside our Cookham and Muslim support program. Rick can talk more about it because he's really embedded in it, but it's a very cool program that's really gaining a lot of momentum in the community to support dads, to be good fathers. We hear it all the time. There's no supports for dads. I mean, I'm a dad too, and I remember, and I'm Caucasian and, have a lot of privilege just because of that, but I felt really alone when I was having babies. So we built this really cool project. And thirdly, we have our iHealthy program, the Indigenous component of the Healthy Life Trajectories Initiative. This is building towards an Indigenous-driven birth cohort study that the community is leading. So Musqueam is one of a whole host of communities involved. But what I really want to get to is this slide, and it's my last slide, and then I'll turn it over to Rick to give his perspectives. But these are the messages I really wanted to drive home today and talk about those key underpinnings that we've learned of how do we develop trust, I'll talk about that between Rick and I and between members of our research group. So as I mentioned, I'm a partner. We come together in that way. We don't come together as settler and elder, we don't come together as researcher and community member. It's partners. That's how we talk about ourselves. And we acknowledge that, what we do in Musqueam is going to be different from any other community, right? And there's a spectrum of relationship building and engagement in communities. So it's going to look very different in every community, but we do feel that there's certain things we've learned, and these are the messages here that are important for people when they're thinking about building trust, that have worked for us, that have grounded us. So we really think about reframing those Western perspectives that we're so used to, right? That our funders and our institutions have made us really used to. And we have to break those down in order to do good research. So the first thing that's been, I think, really, really important for us to build a relationship and build trust is ceremony. Rick will talk more about this. It's not just a ritual, it's embedded into everything that we do. And I think we weren't able to fully trust one another until we came together in that space. Ceremony permeates all aspects of our research. I think it's really grounding, like it helps remind you of why you're doing this, helps ground us in the intent and commitment of our work. And I think in ceremony, our relationships transcend the Western thinking of what a relationship is and become something more. It allows us to connect on a heart-to-heart basis rather than just our minds. It's a personal space in ceremony. It's a vulnerable space where we open up to one another. It's a kind space. It's a compassionate space. So our spirits connect there. And I think what's really cool, Rick mentioned this once to me, it's in ceremony, it opens up a new way of thinking, a different way of thinking, ceremonial thinking where anything is possible, right? Where we're not in this little box, where we can think outside the box. So secondly, what's been really important and a core kind of tenet of our work is humility. So it's not Richard in his ivory tower at the university knowing what's best for Musqueam. It's us coming together as equals. We make space to acknowledge that we come from different places and that we have different ways of viewing the world. And we like to explore those different ways and learn from one another. So it's not the thinking that there's one way to think about the world, or that there's one right way to think about the world. There's many ways to think about the world and to think about health and well-being. So we willingly accept that we're different and we open up our hearts and minds to different ways of thinking. So emotional investment, I talked a little bit about this, but we are personally invested in one another. We are emotionally invested in one another. My kids call Rick Musum. They're his grandkids. Rick is a father to me in a very real way. And our relationships and our partnership are considered lifelong. It's not something that just ends once the research project's over. Okay, see you later, nice to know you. It's something that's much more deeper than that. So we spend a lot of time personally connecting. When we have our meetings, the first half is always catching up personally, what's going on in people's lives, supporting one another. Then we'll get down to business. Sometimes we don't get down to business. Sometimes there's just a lot going on in people's lives and we need to be there for one another. And it's really important. So I think the depth of our relationship can be akin to family. I can certainly tell you that I get teased like family. And, another thing like family is Rick's seen me at my worst, and he's still there like family. And, really importantly is time and effort and flexibility. So building trust takes time, right? In research, we often don't have a lot of time. We have timelines and we have to stick by our timelines. That doesn't gel well. So like I said at the start, our whole framework is flipping that around. When we write our grant proposals, we write about how much time we're going to need to engage the community and how much time we're going to need to build the relationships, and that we can't actually prescribe how long that will take. It will take as long as it takes. We have to go at the pace of the community. So we need a lot of flexibility around that. We need time to nurture our relationships, and it doesn't fit into a 9-to-5 checkbox. And it's not a checkbox. It's not something that you can say, okay, we're done. We've built our relationship. It's not that easy. In fact, we have a partnership that's been in place for 10 years and we still have issues that come up, right? Just like any family or group of people that we have to deal with. But we really believe that if we don't have that foundation, then we don't have anything. And I think our work has proven that because we have trust in one another, we were able to build some of those programs that I had no time to speak about, but I'd be happy to answer questions about or show you some of our reports or papers and, connect with me to learn more. But I'm going to turn it over to Rick, our main act. He can fill in everything that I likely missed.
In that 2 seconds, it just made me nervous. Ethical practices, living our lives ethically, mentally, physically, and spiritually. When I thought about that, what does ethics mean? I went to look it up. It's based on our belief system. So when someone's judging you on your ethical practice, they're basing their belief system on you. And what if you were right and they were wrong? We always look at this one-way street that there's always right and wrong, but what if we are both right? But how do you live your life at home? When we talk about, can we put the word ethical practices into our home life? We don't put it there because we don't look at it that way, because it's based on our belief system. And so when we talk about that, is it ethical practice to be racist? How do you justify that when you're based on your belief system? The new Canadians come into Canada, excuse me, and somewhere along the lines, it gives them the right to be racist to Indian people. So one time I asked a new Canadian, I said, what gives you the right to be racist to us? When you're running from your land, you're treated like that, and then you come here and you're trying to do the same thing to us. And I said, you don't have that right. No one has the right to be racist to each other. And that's the problem with Canada. Canada's that question of asking that uncomfortable question, and Canada's not ready for the uncomfortable answer. Today, we look at Canada. I spoke about 2 months ago at the mayors of Alberta in Edmonton. And I said, rural Alberta is changing. It's no longer rural white Alberta. Many nations are coming to live in rural Alberta. They're owning gas stations. They're owning the convenience store. People from all over the world are moving to the rural area. There is no more, rural Alberta is no longer going to be there. The rural white Alberta. And this is good. But Canada is not ready for that. They accept Canada, they accept everybody, but at the same time, what is their real feeling? When a Pakistani person is running the gas station, excuse me, they really accept that person. But yet that person saved their economy. The more new Canadians come into rural Alberta, the more their economy, their towns survive because of new Canadians. So the redneck Albertan has to step back and go into the closet and speak like this. Before, he was pretty adamant. Now it's not like that no more. Canada's changing because, and here's the funny part. I never quite understood this. When they call the new immigrants, the old immigrants are calling the new immigrants immigrants. It's kind of like me calling the Indian an Indian. It doesn't make sense, but in their minds, it makes sense. We need to change those thinking. Now, where is the ethics of these people that go to Sunday church and pray, and they lose that thought when they walk out the church door? We need to think about that. We're still living in a situation where it's okay to kill an Indian. It's okay to murder and rape a woman, an Indian woman, and have her disappear. We're still living in a situation where we have murdered missing women, and the Canadian government wouldn't put men at the end. We're still fighting that. We still want that at the end of that sentence. Because our men and young boys are disappearing as well. So it's interesting. Like when I worked with the United Nations for 25 years. We worked with our NGO, was the International Organization of Indigenous Resource Development. It took us 5 years to put S on peoples. The governments didn't want, they wanted a plural concept of people. But if we put peoples, that means everybody's included. We fought, we negotiated, we finally got it done after 5 years. We got that infamous S at the end of peoples. So I guess it's going to take me 5 years to get men put at the end of murdered missing women. And it shouldn't be like that. But yet today, we're 2022 and we're still dealing with colonialistic thinking. People of color. I met a doctor, excuse me. I met a doctor in Edmonton, and she's a Pakistani doctor. She's a specialist in lung and kidneys. And she was talking to me and I said, don't mind me. And I said, excuse me. She goes, yeah, yes, Rick. Do you think you're a white person? She goes, what? Well, you talk to me like you're a white person. Do you realize you're brown like me? That you're a person of color? She goes, she was kind of shocked. She goes, I never thought of it that way. Well, you are. Go home, do your homework. We'll talk again. Talk to your husband, who's a brain surgeon. She came back, she says, oh my God, Rick, I can't believe you've opened that door that we've never thought of opening. And I guess we never realized this. It's because you thought you were accepted because you because of your intelligence and because you were able to do this stuff, not thinking that that you were not really accepted because you're brown, like me. We're on the same, you're on my side of the fence. Welcome to my world. Shocked the heck out of her. Because we are still living in that kind of country today. We use the word ally. I hear that a lot of times. I disagree with the word ally because we're not at war. Unless somebody didn't, I guess we're kind of at war with Canada, with the Canadian government for the last up to 10 years. But the thing is that we need partners. Canada, in order to move Canada forward, we need to come together. But in order to be partners, we have to be able to take that effort to create that trust. Like Kayla over there, my star student there, she has immersed herself in Fort Chip with the people and has a relationship. They know her, they walks in, has tea. She is not a researcher, she is Kayla. And she's taking that effort to go there to get to that point in her life. It's no longer a ritual to do her research. It's a ceremony of life that she's doing now. These human beings that they're researching, it's realizing that these human beings are humans and they have lives, they have spirit, they have history. And so we're now looking at what is the ceremony of life. I had an individual once tell me, how do I go from ritual? A grandfather from out east, I was doing a podcast. He said, I want to go from ritual. How can I change the world from ritual to ceremony? I says, bring ceremony into your home. Start there. Because we always tend to think we got to do it big wise, but we need to do it in our own homes. We need to bring ceremony back into our homes. And that's something that's important. Ceremony is based on respect of our elders, our grandfathers and grandmothers, of each other. And that's something that's so important. Creating good memories together. My ceremony of life, I started when I was 60 years old, and I realized my 37 grandkids don't really know me. So I said, well, my time is short. I better get off my horse and start getting to know my grandkids. My whole reason of my life today is creating memories with my grandkids, all 37 of them. and my 10 great grandchildren. So I have a whole, if I can live 20 years, I'll fill those 20 years. I know what my destiny is. What I'm doing here is because I like doing this, but my real life, my real point of my life is creating memories with my grandkids and my wife. And that's important. What happened when the COVID happened, everybody became Canada, everybody in Canada all became the same. It didn't matter what color, how much money you had, or where you came from, or the bush or the city. We were all equal at that 3-year period or 2-year period. We were all equal. That disease put us all at the same place. Racism wasn't there. We were too busy trying to stay alive. We were too busy getting to know each other. One of the things that happened in race when the COVID happened, men and women sat across the table from each other and went, "Who the heck are you?" There were so many families that got up and said, "I'm done. I don't even know you." Because it was easy to get up in the morning and do our ritual, go to work, come home, "Hi, honey," go to bed, go to work. Never really sitting down with each other, even on the weekends, it just goes by. But when you got to sit down with each other for a month, and you start to look across the table and think, who the heck are these guys? And whose kids are these? Because we never took that time. And yet, historically, if you look at your great-great-grandfathers, that created that time when they would visit each other and share. Today, we're so fragmented in society, even within our families, we don't know each other. So that's what happened during COVID. We got to know each other. And sometimes we didn't like who was sitting across the table. We didn't realize who they were. They had changed. And sometimes the other way around, like everything else, you grew to love each other even more. And you got to know your children even more. And that's one of the things that happened. And those things that happened in COVID is what is interestingly enough is what naturally happens with my people. We get to know each other, we visit each other, we have ceremony together. So when all my 14 kids, all my 10 kids came home with all their grandchildren, there was 14 of us in the home, that was normal. Usually they came for weekends, but they came for 3 years. I had a Muslim room. My grandkids are all little guys. They'd say, "Oh, Muslims in his timeout room, don't knock on the door." Because I had to have it. Sometimes I have a timeout room. So that was fun. It was, and actually last week, the last 2 moved out, got apartments, got jobs. So now there's just my wife and I and one daughter that's still supposed to be looking after us, I think. But the thing is, the whole change in my house has changed. It's quiet. And I have a nice house. It's a big house. A lot of people, it's interesting. They come in, people drive into my yard and say, "Is this the chief's house?" I go, "No." "What makes you say that?" "Well, you have such a nice yard." "Oh, you should see the chief's yard." "Is it really nice?" "No." I have time to do this. I'm not into politics. My house is 40 years old, 45, I think now. I looked after my house. I respected my house. The spirit in my house is good. My children can come in, there's no fear, or my grandchildren. There's good memories. We had wakes in my house. We had life ceremonies. We've had all the ceremonies. When I built my living room, I built it 20 by 20 for that purpose. To celebrate life, either living or dying. That was my purpose behind building that room. And so that's the whole concept of going from ritual to ceremony, not only in research, but in our own lives. When's the last time anybody said, "I love you"? When's the last time? Yeah, you're making it up now. When's the last time? Everybody. Yeah, done. When's the last time? Right on. Right on. Right on. Right on. Yeah, okay. Right on. Back there. Right on. There's hope. I said mine last night because one of the things I shared with this young lady here is taking care of my could haves and should haves in my life. I learned about that when I went to, we had so many people die in my community. I learned that what do you hear at the coffin is I could have done this, I should have done this. I learned that lesson listening to these people. And I took it home and I took it to heart. And so I do that now. I take care of my could haves and should haves. And I do that knowingly. And that's so important in our lives. That we need to do that. And just even saying I love you. I grew up never hearing that. My parents, my mother, my father, and my grandfather, my mother, my grandfather went to residential school, and so did I. I'm a third generation survivor. I never heard that word. I love you. I didn't even know what it meant. And then my wife's mother went to Spanish in Ontario, which was a Alcatraz of residential schools. It was a horrible place for young women and boys. Her mother never spoke of that place, and she never heard the word love. So today one day we sat down and said, we need to change this cycle. Today I tell my boys and my daughters I love them, but when they walk out the door. That's important. So if I don't see them again, they know the last words they heard from me is I love you. That's so important. That's why that simple word, I love you, is so important. And that's something that people don't understand sometimes. We just take it for granted and we don't realize that. Yet that's the most important. That's what got us married. We said to our wife or husband, I love you. And that started that whole relationship. But we need to understand that word. We need to carry that word every day. What if we said that word every day for the rest of our lives from this day on? Could you imagine how you would feel every day? It pushed the depression away, anxiety, because you can't say, I love you. It's got to come from the heart. That's what I'm talking about, ritual versus ceremony. But the reason I bring that in that is as researchers, it's based on you as individuals, you as a person to other people, that relationship, that human being, that human contact is important. And if you can't love someone and you expect these people to love you, well, then how's that going to work? If you're not strong with your own beliefs and you're coming to people who have beliefs, how's that going to work? And that's important to understand that and move with that and grow with that. And that's something that's sharing that. If you look at all these people are human beings. They all have lives. They all come from ancestors of 3,000 years old or more. Every one of them up there. Even that little one there sitting on my lap, Cece. She comes from her ancestors 3,000 in Europe. One of the things that drives me nuts about Canada is they tell you to forget who you are. But interesting enough, we have Chinese Canadians, Pakistani Canadians, all these nationalities, but you never hear white Canadians. Why is that? But yet we accept that. Why do we accept that? We need to say, if you're going to be Canadian, you're Canadian. But we need to celebrate your history of who you are and how you got to be here, your ancestors. The church tried to do that to us. They told us not to believe in our ancestors. They didn't count. We had to follow the ancestors in the Roman Catholic Church, and we had no relationship with those ancestors. When you really think about it, even the church didn't have a relationship. It was more of a ritual than it was actually a ceremony. But we were persecuted and put in residential schools to follow these ancestors we had no clue of. And they kept telling us they loved us, but meanwhile, what they did to us wasn't love at all. So it's interesting when we talk about that and we wonder why, where are we today in our spirituality? Who are we? One prediction a grandmother shared with me is that in the future, the young people are not going to have any belief system, and the devil, the dark side, whatever you want to call him, is going to walk around collecting these souls of these young people that don't believe in anything and say, you're neutral, I can have you, and bringing them over to the negative side. Because and they're doing that. It's happening today. We just don't realize it. There is a war between good and evil. The churches don't talk about the dark side. They only talk about God, which is okay. It's great, but they need to talk about, why do we need to go to God? Because he's waiting to take us. That's reality. Spirituality. The dark side, the good side. I had a young woman come into my sweat that was atheist. She says, I don't believe in nothing. I don't care. I'm not here to convert you. I'm here to have a sweat. And at the end of the sweat, she left. She'd go, holy macro, that is so amazing. I thought you didn't believe in anything. Well, that was before I walked in. Thank you. But we're not here to convert anybody. One of the interesting part about our people is we all share God. The Ojibways, the Blackfoots, the Nakota people, all the different tribes across Canada, we all share God. We all speak in our languages, but we don't say Cree is the only way to God. We say, whatever tribe you're at, that's your way. That's your language. Cree is not the only language. I had a debate with a Frenchman on a podcast one time. He's trying to tell me something. I said, let me guess, you think you were here before the Indians, right? Yes, we. And I go, where's your tribe? In France. Well, then you weren't here before. The Iroquois, Mohawks. Well, they were animals. They didn't count. I says, my friend, there's about 4 Iroquois that are going to come and visit you. And they're going to have a talk with you. Oh, I'm sorry, Smith. And he hung up. But that was the Canadian, that was not that long ago. People still think of us as animals because of the, what's that word? When the Pope came to Muscatine, to my land, they wanted to change the doctrine of discovery. But that was not only was that about my people, that was about the people around the world where the churches have land. People don't realize the church in every Indian reserve is owned by the Catholic Church. That piece of land is theirs. They can sell it. It's their land. And so when the Pope came and he needed to, and we wanted him to do the talk about the doctrine of discovery. If we could rescind that, that's still in the works. Whether it happens in this lifetime, I don't know, because he's pretty old, but he still was able to stand up on his own and publicly apologize and come to Canada, to our lands, to acknowledge what happened was wrong. I give him that. Considering he has to deal with all these, it's like government. The Prime Minister has to answer to his people. The Pope has his people to answer to what he's doing, but he took it and did it on his own. I give him that. I respect that. Because that's important. But life, how's my time? Okay. I like her answer better. So it's important to understand who we are and who we are in our work, in our beliefs. Because what is that lens that you look through? When Adam came, a young man that works with Rick and I, he asked him, What's the difference? Now you've been working with us. How many years? 3 years? 2 years? What's the difference between when you first came to Musquechies? And he says, you know, I hear you talk about the lens. He says, my lens I was looking at you is very different. Today, I was looking this way. Now I'm standing with you and I'm looking that way. I said, interesting, eh? He says, yes. And I said, right on. But I didn't teach him that. He learned that by just participating with me. It wasn't a teaching moment that he got that from. It was because he lived with us and participated us and had the trust to be with us, to have that moment. That's important. And one last thing I'll leave with you is that when you come to our communities, find out who that person you're going to see is. If it's a medicine person, if you're going to go to a ceremony with a sweat, take the time and effort to find out who that individual is. Because I'll tell you what, there's a lot of tricksters out there. And we have a beautiful way of prayer, but there are a lot of born again elders that were in residential school that were hurt, and then they want to hurt others. And I'm being honest with that. Researchers, actually, we have had non-Indian researchers research us so well, they became Indians. And they're even better Indians than us. And they were the good Indians. Government loved them. I'm proud to be the bad Indian because I ask questions and I stand up for what I believe in. The make-believe Indians follow government's guidelines and all that. And they like those good Indians, even though they know they're not real Indians, but they do what they like. So they let them masquerade as an Indian until they get found out. Then all of a sudden government says, I didn't know. BS. They have our numbers. They know who's real. But the thing is, it's because they serve their purpose, the Canadian government's purpose. It's okay to learn about us, but it comes down to rights. Who has the right? I met a lady claiming to be a water walker or something, claiming she has a right. She didn't know I knew her the family of this people in Ontario. We called them and they found out she's not who she is. She's good. She's a good con. A lot of these wannabe Indians got you convinced they're Indian. But one of the things I want to share with you, I'll leave with you, is they're so general. When you ask them about their history, they're general. Oh, my mother was a drug addict on the street in downtown Regina. There. Okay, what's her name? Doesn't matter. My grandfather was from somewhere over there. Where? Over there. Everything, never ever specific. I can give you specific. I know my dad, my mother's place, where I was born. I was born in a Morley Hospital in 1953 on the riverbank by the band office. I can go back. I was in the Foothills Hospital 2 weeks after that. I was born in June, so in July I was in Foothills Hospital dying. They saved me. And the reason they saved me is because we were in the Indian village, and at the time, the Indian village people had the right to be able to use the white hospitals. And that's what saved my life. Because other than that, when I was born in the Morley Hospital, because it was an Indian hospital, I was sent home to die. I just read about that, actually. I was wondering why. It said that the Indians in the Indian village at the Calgary Stampede had permission to go to the white hospital when they're in the Indian village. So actually that saved my life. I'll leave you with some last thing. When the Pope came, they paved our roads in the reserve. And I was so happy. But it made me even more happier. My band said the German television crew are coming to your house, Rick. They want to interview you, okay? My father said, oh, yeah, but my road is so bumpy, it's gonna reflect on you guys. Can you fix it? So the next day they fixed my road. So the Pope not only got the pavement in Ermineskin, he also got my road fixed too. Thank you, Pope. Hi, hi.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the room or online? Yeah.
So many issues that you bring up and traits that are seem to be really meaningful to you. I think you inspired me to think about the things in which I might be able to enact that into the content. I'll just leave you with one attempt that I made not very long ago. I'm from a critical disability studies program, and it was a study of a child's experience in education. And the child has severe intellectual impairments. And we did all sorts of interviews with teachers and principals and parents and other personnel in the school, document analysis and so on. And what we concluded in that article is that the greatest possibility, it's not about policy, it's not about greatest possibility for true love. And it's one article that kind of shines on this in the title that says that's I think where that hope is.
Yeah, and it's like, talk about critical, you talk about the critical mind, you talk about the mind. Tethering the mind, that case, the child's gonna fail. So we know that already. We're just trying to figure out how much it's gonna fail. So then we need to do is look at what is it that we have measuring the emotional part of this child. He's afraid to run. So he may not be able to think, but that would be able to have that balance of his emotional. Like we call children that have handicaps, we call them say what's with meaning or stupid. Don't have, like, you don't call them handicapped, you don't call them stupid. That help a little?
Do I look at the chat here or do you read a different chat to identify questions? I haven't looked. I don't want to press it and have it disrupt this. But I'll press it. Oh, okay. There's not a question.
Rick and I wrote a paper. Elaborates on a lot of
Share it to us too, because through the IPH CPR network, we also have newsletters with links to resources as well. And we can maybe get something out that way too. And to end on love, perhaps, I was contracted with several years ago with the provincial government to do a literature review on Indigenous youth suicide prevention. And is scoping review, our methodologies are really sort of laid out for us in health. And yet the advisory board, we had about 13 people on our advisory group, basically kept saying time and again, yeah, none of this matters unless there's love. And so after we finished the scoping review and followed this very kind of standard literature review process, we decided to go back and do a realist analysis and take the hypothesis of what does love look like in programming that exists. And we could identify it there. It was everywhere. It was in healthy relationships. It was in programs to be empathetic about what time youth start school. Maybe we don't need to make them start at 9 o'clock when their circadian rhythms are, more conducive to starting at 11 in the middle of winter when it's dark out, and that's their bodies, and we care about their bodies and their growth. And so I think it really highlighted for me just how much Western and Indigenous knowledge systems have so much to support one another. And it's about those relationships to allow all of us to recognize that we're in a space where we can be mutually respectful and understanding of one another and learn to speak common language about the so-called problems we see that I think I've learned to not characterize as problems, like Richard was highlighting. A strength-based lens, an appreciative lens, it goes a long ways in recognizing and caring about people. And I love to end on love. So thank you so much.